Someone that came last year to the Illuminations, what can they expect different this year?
Well, I think they're going to be bowled off their feet for a start. What's really nice about this year's Illuminations is that we've got this sense of technology catching up with us. For years, the transition from the old-fashioned tungsten bulbs into the LED has meant that we've been quite kind of held back by what we can do technically. Suddenly, in conjunction with sponsors like Northern Rail and Design for Walls, we can really start stretching the potential of the light that we can create for the Illuminations. And I think, at the heart of it, obviously, the Illuminations is all about this incredible moment when autumn is setting in, when every other, seaside resort in the country is turning the lights off. We are turning the lights on. And the lights for 2019 are going to be bigger, more colourful, more exciting, and I think much more engaging than they've been for an incredibly long time. Blackpool invented this idea of cutting-edge technology when it created the Light Festival in 1911, and we're now bringing that back to Blackpool as far as I'm concerned.
You mentioned the sponsors then. How vital a component are they to the Illuminations in general?
Well, the thing is, without, we're very, very lucky. We have such incredible respect and support from the council. The Illuminations period is worth 200 million to the town. So, above and beyond what anyone makes during during the holiday season, actually the Illuminations brings in an enormous amount of money on top of that. And the council will, they have said that the Illuminations will always be there, they will always be maintained, but they cannot be called upon to provide money for newness. We have to have relationships with sponsors to be able to put new stuff up, which in many ways I see as a very creative thing, because it means that we can go to, for instance, Four Walls, who are based in Las Vegas, and bring their kind of Vegas showmanship into the Illuminations alongside their support, alongside their kind of financial contribution. But in many ways, the really, really big headline for 2019 is the launch of the Illuminations competition. I'm now throwing this entirely to you. I'm giving a big section of the Illuminations leading up to the tower to anyone who's got a good enough idea for it. There's £100,000 in the budget to be able to do it, to implement it, and it's entirely open. It can be, a designer, it can be an architect, it can be a lighting designer, or it can be your mum, it can be your sister, it can be your nephew. Anyone who's got a really unusual blue sky idea about doing something that the Illuminations has never done before, we will do in time for Switch On in 2020. And I think that this is where we are now with the Illuminations. We are now getting to that point of kind of liftoff. That the Illuminations from now on is going to be about these very, very big, very eye-catching statements, which I want to bring the world's attention back to Blackpool. Blackpool is the original Light Festival. It needs to now start being the best again.
Is the competition idea, obviously there's £100,000 in the budget for someone that has the best idea. Is that a move away from your traditional works and maybe you're looking at something new, or is it a case that maybe we're running dry on ideas?
Well, we'll never run dry on ideas, but what I really wanted to do was to bring a sense of freshness. And also, I love the idea of giving somebody literally an opportunity to see their work in lights. It's something that I've been doing for years, working with Blackpool, but it's wonderful to know that there's something that you've made that's visible from space. And so a big part of the brief of the competition is to say to anyone entering, yes, it's about this space that leads up to the tower, but don't just see it as the traditional illuminations across the road. Listen, illuminate the beach, illuminate the sea, illuminate the sky, illuminate the buildings. Really literally look at it in a way that's never been looked at before. And I think this is one of the things, obviously, the Blackpool Illuminations, it is a festival for the people. It is, all about illuminated art that we can all enjoy. So let's start encouraging new talent, for goodness sake. It might be new talent that comes from your granny. You're never too old to have new talent, in my experience.
You said you can see the Illuminations from space. We've got a rather large astronaut in the building here today. It's 50 years since the moon landings.
Yes.
How much is that going to be a part of the illuminations this year?
Well, we're obviously referencing it because it's such an iconic moment. I mean, I can remember, actually remember the landing. It was the one and only time my parents actually had the television on during the day because, back in 1969, television just didn't exist during the day. And I think it's, in so many ways, the fact that we got men to the moon is very similar to the kind of spirit that created the Blackpool Tower in the early days, that built the architecture, that kept Blackpool wanting to innovate, to embrace the latest technology, but also to always be the biggest and always be the best. So, of course, the moon's there. We've also, of course, got the moon very much as part of the Lightpool Festival as well. The moon has come to Blackpool.
And just moving next to the astronaut there's a rather large Sooty. Sooty's got an increasing role in Blackpool Illuminations over the last couple of years. Why is that?
I mean, Sooty, it's been lovely actually. I mean, Sooty has always, Richard and Sooty have always been very, very supportive of what Blackpool does and how special Blackpool is. And I think that Blackpool suits, because Sooty, it's a children's program, but actually there's something quite adult about Sooty. There's always something a little bit knowing about Sooty. And so it's very fitting, I think, that we've now got him right in the centre of the illuminations. He's been part of the illuminations for a long time with the tableau and with some of the projection work onto the Tower Ballroom. But he's now absolutely enshrined, like the icon he is. The fabric icon he is.
It wouldn't happen to be anything to do with the fact that they're a sponsor of the event?
Well, we need the sponsors, absolutely. And what my job is as creative curator is to ensure that when the sponsors come to us, we find creative ways of integrating their message into the illumination. So what I don't want is for it just to be, a kind of a shop signboard. And this is what all the sponsors are so excited about, like Northern Rail, like Four Walls, is that they can basically tell their story in a very subtle way, so that when people are watching their presentation, they're not bombarded with marketing statements. They're just going, oh, okay, this is cool. So in many ways, I mean, I say this to them, that I like to see them more as patrons rather than sponsors, because we work with them to create an illuminated art piece or an illuminated experience, which is then something that is paid for by them. So of course they're in there, but it's not all about their name. And that's something that's worked very, very well with the relationships we've developed with Hounds Hill, with Beaver Brooks, with a lot of the hotel guys, with Genting over the years.
And there is a feeling in the town, certainly among some residents, that the illuminations are for the visitors more so than the residents, whereas it's their council tax that's funding it. Is there anything you can do from a curator's point of view to give back to the community?
Well, I think 200 million quid's quite a good donation back to the community, which is exactly how much the town makes on during that illuminations period. So anyone who has a business in Blackpool will feel the financial impact of having the illuminations. That's an enormous chunk of money to not have. So actually, I mean, I do understand that, of course, when you live in Blackpool and you see the illuminations every day, you're not going to be excited by them in the way that a holidaymaker who sees them for 3 days will be. I always see my job as trying to ensure that the illuminations are worth seeing on a wet Tuesday morning when you're queuing for a bus going to work. That actually they're not so tawdry, they're not so, kind of tacky that it's something you feel slightly embarrassed about. But then having said that, I also want to make sure that we keep the inherent spirit of Blackpool, which is jazz hands, it is show business. So it's trying to keep that balance between something that is exciting but is also relatively classy. And I think we're definitely now achieving that with for things like the light arches that we're doing with Northern Rail and the light theatre that we're doing for Walls. These are really very exciting, very contemporary art statements in their own right. And I think people won't get bored of them, and I think people won't grudge them. I think people will enjoy them.
And I think the chance of obviously being part of the £100,000 would go quite a long way to getting people on board as well.
Well, exactly. Although, it's £100,000 which goes to the light. I don't want anyone thinking that they can kind of do a drawing one bulb and then keep the change. That's the budget to build the illumination. So actually, it's about the glory of it. But I mean, obviously, this is an enormous platform for anyone. Particularly, I mean, I'm kind of hoping we're going to find a young designer or someone who really has a fire in their belly to do something quite special, that this will then become the launch of their career. Or I haven't said a young designer, like I say, it could be your granny. It could be the launch of her career as a lighting designer. There she is, sort of, in her mid-80s, but suddenly she's doing Vegas.